you from the Social Equity Leadership Conference in Kansas City, Missouri. This is GovLove, a podcast about local government. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. We engage the brightest minds in local government. Visit elgl.org to learn more. I'm Lauren Palmer, the Director of Local Government Services for the Mid-America Regional Council and a GovLove host. Today's episode is part of a series from the 2023 Social Equity Leadership Conference. The National Academy of Public Administration has sponsored a conference on social equity for 22 years, and this year NAPA partnered with the University of Kansas and the Mid-America Regional Council to host the conference in America's Heartland. SELC brings together academics and practitioners to learn about putting social equity policy, practices, and processes into action. My guest is Craig Owens, the City Manager for the City of Lawrence, Kansas. Today I'm talking with Craig about his work in Lawrence to embed equity into priority-based budgeting for the city. Craig, welcome to GovLove.
Thank you very much.
Very glad to have you. Welcome to SELC.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, a tradition we have here on GovLove, we like to start with a lightning round for our guests just to get to know you a little bit better. So my first question is, what's a food that you hate but most people enjoy?
I thought about this a little bit, and I like a lot of food. There wasn't too much that I could say I hate, but I also realized that globally, like 8 billion people eat bugs. They eat insects as a part of their diet, and I don't think I've brought myself to that yet. So I would say that might qualify.
Okay, bugs. I gotta say, though, I'm not sure that really rolls with the question. I'm not sure most people enjoy bugs, but I guess you're saying globally.
Globally, a whole bunch of people do.
Okay. It's not too late.
No,
you could try
it's
some.
not, and I guess maybe I'm motivated now.
I hope you get that opportunity in life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like that too. There aren't really foods that I hate. I'm kind of an easy to please palate kind of person. All right, very good. Next question. What's something that made you smile this week?
One thing personally, so my twin boys had a birthday, and we took them to Great Wolf Lodge and did all kinds of fun things there. And I was surprised, however, when we got done, I asked my son what was his favorite part, and it was the yoga in the lobby with our family. We haven't done yoga together as a family, so that stood out over the water slides, over all of the greasy fried food, pizza, everything else that we did. That was his favorite part. That's pretty heartwarming. So
you're hinting at it there for our listeners who may not be familiar with the experience of the Great Wolf Lodge.
Yeah.
Tell them about this.
Yeah, it's just a huge, heavily chlorinated water park with lots and lots of noise and activity, and it's in a big lodge theme and
family yoga
animals,
in the
family
lobby.
Yoga. Mm-hmm.
How old are your boys?
They just turned 19, actually. So I have one going off to college, another one doing some training, and.
But you're twins who just had the birthday?
Yes,
I know.
That's hard to believe.
That's them. You all went to the Great Wolf Lodge.
We did, and
awesome.
Joined by their mom and also their little brother, who is 6.
Oh my gosh! Well, that's a nice family.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that with us. All right, and then my final lightning round question. Tell us about something from your bucket list, other than eating bugs, which you've already shared.
Now it's on the bucket list. My brother and I have always talked about going and seeing some European football,
Nice.
And we have pledged to each other it's going to happen here in the next year or two. So I'm really excited about that. Getting ready for the 26 World Cup, we got to get the bug.
I was going to say the 2026 World Cup going to be right here in Kansas City.
Yep.
Can enjoy that in a few years.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, now let's get started with our interview. To start, we always ask our guests to just tell us a little bit about your career path and what led you into your current role.
Sure. So I will really quickly go way back, and I grew up in a council member's household. So my father served on the city council in the hometown where I grew up. When I was young, served for 24 years. Mom took his seat after he left to go to the legislature, and so I was immersed in this at a very young age in local government, and had maps in our living room and all the constituent phone calls on the answering machine, which we had. Yes, the answering machine. So I heard a lot about the back end and backside of local government, and it was apparently sinking in. So went off to college, graduate school, interned for a couple cities, and then first full-time job in the St. Louis area where I hadn't really been before, and was assistant to the city manager in a town there for several years, and then across the river on the Illinois side of the St. Louis area for a few years as my first city administrator position. And then down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and enjoyed 6 years down there, and then back to the St. Louis area for Clayton, Missouri, where I served for 12 years as the city manager. And then 4 years ago, made the path back to Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, and have had a great time.
So growing up, did you kind of have that bug? Did you know that you wanted to go into the family business, or did you kind of resist it and then it crept up on you?
No, it really crept up on me, and this is all about Gov Love. You know, it was getting into my core, and I didn't know it. So I took I was poli-sci major in undergrad, and I was in a class that was state and local government. I don't know why somebody thinks that those two are so similar that they should just be one class, but that's on a lot of curriculums. Mm-hmm. So I was a little frustrated because we got a lot of government from about the state, a lot of education about the state. We read all about it. My professor had served at the state level, but when it got to local government, not really any experience. And I was like, well, what about this? What about that? You know, knowing that those are council agenda items that my parents had both been dealing with, and it was kind of funny that, you know, I was adding a lot of that knowledge to the classwork because of the local government experience that I had had. So whether I was going to law school or public administration, I hadn't really determined. And, you know, I did the internship, caught the bug, had some just awesome, great ones in our profession who really inspired me. And I saw a career path. I saw the lives that they led, you know, in their families, and that it was something, you know, it wasn't just the job, it was the way they were a part of the community. And, you know, said, if that's what I end up doing, something like that, I'm in. And 33 years later, still in.
Oh, okay, Craig, speaking of great ones in the profession, you're being modest. Mm-hmm. I want our listeners to know Craig is a J.T. Bell Award winner, which is basically City Manager of the Year in Missouri.
Yeah, and that was big honor.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So you're one of the great ones in the profession and have been an inspiration to a lot of up-and-comers in the state of Missouri and now in Kansas.
It's nice and is very hard to understand. It happens so fast.
Oh, you're like a lot of public servants, modest, but you know, you've had a great career, and we're going to talk more about it. Mm-hmm. So next, tell us about the city of Lawrence for any of our listeners who may not have been there and been to Kansas. Tell us a little bit about the community you serve.
Lawrence was a city founded on an ideal. It's known as Free State, and it came in the Missouri Compromise, and it was a political movement to settle in this part of Kansas before the Missouri Compromise, and they would determine whether they would be a free or a slave state. And so Lawrence is very proud of that. That's where some tragic, the Bleeding Kansas and the burning of our downtown in those the beginnings of the Civil War. Those are all part of our deep history. And if you ask anybody walking around the streets of Lawrence about that, they'll tell you a lot. We have a lot of an embrace of history, and it's largely because of those ideals that are there. And hometown of Langston Hughes, and there's just some wonderful history that's in there. It affects our day-to-day. You know, it affects the passion people have, the expectation for the way we deliver government services, and it doesn't make it easier, but it makes it better, it makes it richer, and so that's been an interesting thing that you just don't necessarily get in the statistical log of about a city. But Lawrence is about 100,000. It's most famously known as the home of the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, especially recently. We've done okay. It is a big influence on our community. A lot of people work there. Obviously, a lot of students are a part of our community that go to school there. There's a lot of research and institutions a lot of research that goes on at this university. Amazing amounts. I still could uncover things that are done at the campus that I had no idea were affecting and changing the world. But the community is a full-service city, so we do sewer, water, police, fire, public works. We do our own solid waste hauling, environmental. We maintain a levee. We're on the Kansas River, and we maintain a levee. We have cemeteries. We do a full service for the community, Parks and Recreation, big extension system. So it's a growing community. We're it took me about 35 minutes to get here to downtown Kansas City. So we're pretty close, and I've worked in other metropolitan areas, and this would always be considered to be a close by suburb if we were in there. But here we still have some agricultural area between us and Kansas City, but we feel like we're part of the metro Kansas City most of the time.
I feel like you're part of the metro too. We're glad to have you here in Kansas City this week, enjoying the Social Equity Leadership Conference. Right. So, what brought you to SELC?
I am a University of Kansas graduate, so coming back in and understanding some of the work that, from a different angle probably, it's been fun to reconnect with the university and a lot of the research that goes on. So this was a conference that University of Kansas has an association with for a long time. And it was an honor to be asked to speak on a couple of subjects here because of the work that we're doing in Lawrence. And so it's been fun to share that story, but also to just hear about all the other things that are happening and the work that's being done around the country. And the academic, too. I think that's the neat thing about this is, in a opportunity university cities kind of have uniquely, is to say there's people that get to do really thoughtful deep dive research on things that are challenges to us, that are opportunities to us, but there's no way as a practitioner that we'd have time to get into them and understand them with the complexity that the academic partners do. And Napa and Mark and KU have prioritized making the connection between what we know and learn and understand and research with how we're applying those things to communities and the way we're doing our work. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, very well said. Okay, well, let's talk about your work in social equity in Lawrence. In preparing for this interview, I read that the City of Lawrence vision statement includes, in part, an equitable local government. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean to you?
We believe that everybody in our community deserves great municipal services. And it says a place where people enjoy life and feel at home. And that can be achievable and should be achievable for everybody. Now, what needs somebody has to make that a reality for them might vary greatly. Mm-hmm. And if we think that everybody exists and lives their lives in the same way that we do, then we will probably not be providing the services that are equitable and getting to the needs that they really have. Again, it's something like I said earlier, it's not easier. It's easier to be just have one package and this is exactly how we do it for every person, and you get it or you don't get it, that's up to you. Instead of trying to be thoughtful about the way we deliver all of our services across the board and how people, not only what services do they really need so that we adapt our packages to those, but also in the way we're delivering services, are we meeting the needs of a diverse the diversity in our community.
So you mentioned this mission statement to create a community where all feel at home, and the city has established 6 commitments that support that mission. One of those commitments is equity and inclusion. So what outcomes are you hoping to achieve for Lawrence by centering equity and inclusion in government services?
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word outcome. We also have 5 outcomes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we use those very intentionally. This is in the design of our strategic plan. So first of all, I want to talk about how it was born, the strategic plan. So when I got to Lawrence, the city commission, they were very open in saying we want to see a lot of things done, but we want to also see the processes done intentionally, and we want to see strategic work done, and we're ready to stay at it for the longer haul. We've had historically a pretty rapid turnover of elected leadership. For a variety of reasons. A lot of people said, hey, I go give my 4 years and then and then it's off to somebody else to do. It's up to somebody else to step in and bring that. In other cases, they just, the community wanted to move off on something else. I think in those situations, it's necessary to lay out a good strategic plan, but you also need to build it around what the community tells you. So we did a community engagement session on steroids. We went to it. I asked our city team members, I said, hey, who will help me go out and listen to the community? Who wants to go out and engage with the community and build the strategic plan? And I hoped for 20. I had 50 volunteers. It was wonderful. So we trained them all up, and this is how you listen, and we go out. I want you to go engage in the community where you already live. Most of our team members live in their communities, and they're a part of their communities.
So those 50 volunteers were from within your organization,
yes,
city staff?
Yep,
Got
team
it.
members.
Okay.
And when I say volunteer, we paid them, but I
Sure.
mean, they said, no, I'm in on that. It's not my job description, but I want to be a part of that. And so we use the diversity of our own team members to access the community where they were already talking about their community. They were already talking about their dreams and aspirations. They were already talking about what did they want and expect from their local government. And so we just tapped into that and captured it, and then brought it back and assimilated it back into some cohesion of a strategic plan. I say that the city commissioners curated that body of information, and we organized them into outcomes, 5 different outcomes: unmistakable identity, strong welcoming neighborhoods, safe and secure, prosperity and economic security, and connected city. We organized those buckets, and that's what we heard people saying. That's what they expect from their community. The other part, and the other thing we heard very clearly from our community, was the way you do your work is as important as what you do. And that's where what we ended up calling our commitments came from. And the commitments are fairly traditional with 2 exceptions. Inspired by the balanced scorecard that Norton and Kaplan built at Harvard Business School several decades ago. It has been a model that's been applied to local government, but it was inspired by that. We want to make sure that these are the lenses through which we're evaluating success and our achievement of outcome. Okay? So these are embedded in the way we do our work. They are our key performance indicators, overlap a commitment and an outcome. So we build them into the system, and we can't escape them. But we also have to account for all 6 of them. And these 6 are 4 more traditional ones that you'd find on the classic balanced scorecard. They're financial, people, process, and customer. I like to say community member versus customer, so that we're not quite so transactional in the work that we do as local government. But also, we knew that we needed to account for, and we heard from the community, you need to be thinking about how you have a relationship with our natural environment. We need to, the way we do our work with local government service provision, we need you to account for environmental impact. And so we added that as a perspective, a lens. The other thing that we heard very, very clearly was equity and inclusion are important pieces of the way we are as a community and the way we want you to be helping us deliver local government services. So that's where this all came from and how we embedded all 6 of those perspectives into it. But equity and inclusion is obviously one we're talking about here this week.
I'm really curious to hear more about how you have incorporated equity into your budgeting process.
Okay. Sure. So, traditionally, and if you just looked at budgeting as a financial exercise, then it'd just be about the money, right? And we know that the way that we achieve outcomes is with resources. We have to account for the resources we're putting in, but the implications of how you apply those resources has an effect on all the other lenses that we're using. So if we aren't intentional and measure the way that we're delivering local government services, building infrastructure, affecting people's lives, hopefully positively and proactively, if we don't account for the impact on different parts of our community, different groups within our community, then we may miss something. So we set up a budget process using priority-based budgeting, something that had entered our organization just before I had gotten there. We work with Resource X, who has helped us put our programs into, when we had to go from a line item to a program budget, right? And that's a big step. I was glad I wasn't here for the beginning of that. That's hard work, and we continue to still stay at it. There's a lot of legacy that's still built into our systems that are line item approaches. But we build a program basis through about, I think, 105 programs. Then we have a scorecard, and we assign points or reevaluate the programs in these proposals in the budget process, and we give points based on their achievement of outcomes. How much good are you doing with the money that we allocate, but also how they're also scoring against the lenses of our commitments, including equity and inclusion. So if you have a program, hopefully what we're seeing now after we've been at it a little bit is that the proposing agencies, the proposing departments, the proposing individual employees, even community members who bring us proposals, are understanding if we account for equity and inclusion in the design and development of our programs, then we will score higher, and it's more likely that we're going to be funded. So that's the journey we've been on. By no means is it perfect. We have a lot of work to do. We are grateful for the work that our community and the patients our community has given us. Also, the elected leadership has said this is a priority, this is the right way to go, and we'll continue to move forward. And it's going to be a tool that we're just engaging in now because our budget year is on a fiscal year, so we're hot into the budget process.
Great. So you talked about how you extensively engaged community in the development of the plan. I think you said community engagement on steroids. Is there community engagement in that scoring process? Is that an internal process among your staff, or do you have a way to get community input in that scoring? Yeah,
it's first we're at the step probably where I call it's very transparent. So we show our work in the scoring of the programs. We're showing our work. We're saying this is how these have scored, this is how we evaluated it. I think some community members, when they reacted last year to the budget, they did start to grab those handles and started to talk in the language of priority-based budgeting, but also how they were scoring and what got good scores and what didn't get good scores, and that's great. That's what we want. We want to have those. That's where the conversation is about community prioritization. So what we're building onto, and we added this year, and we just rolled it out, there's another tool that we've engaged with. It's called Balancing Act, and so we've opened this up to the community. So we've put all 105 programs into the Balancing Act. We've invited the community to go play the game, and you can go from level 1 to level 5 on level of service in 105 program areas, and you can add and subtract resources from there, but you have to balance at the end.
Right.
You can throw some revenue enhancement in there called tax increases, property tax increases. You can play in that too. So if that's how you want to balance, you can do it. But we think this will be the better way of having a conversation instead of the microphone on Tuesday night at the very end of the public hearing process, when we've already put a lot of work and prioritization into building a budget, that somebody has 3 minutes to react. We think engaging at an earlier level and also being, forced into the reality that we have as a community and as an organization and even as a city manager that has to propose a budget. It's good for us to have the people that are commenting on it to be constrained like we are, in that if you want more of something, then you have to have less of something. And if you're okay with less of something, that also has to be accounted for in the impacts that it's going to have on the organization, but also on community members who might disagree with you.
Sure, makes sense. To help me understand better that sequencing, like people can engage in that balancing act process after you've released your budget, but before the public hearing.
Yeah, we put it out earlier. So the city manager's proposed budget will go out the first part of July. And then we will have formal public hearings, and the city commission obviously will engage. We had preliminary conversations with the elected leadership just to kind of say, hey, what parameters can you share with us? What are some high priorities? And for the most part, they said, continue the work on the strategic plan. But we wanted to get this tool out there in the hands of the public so that they can start engaging. And so, we've already had several hundred people engage in it. And I think when it gets closer and we start to get some articles in the newspaper and we start talking about, hey, it's coming in the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to get a lot more participation. And then, yes, there'll probably be people that only pay attention when they see that some cheese is being moved. They only pay attention when something precious to them is being impacted, and we get that. And so hopefully there'll be some engagement at the towards the middle part of it, so that people can come back in and say, well, I don't want that changed, so I'm engaging with the tool to maybe see how we could come up with something else that'll do that. But the main thing is just to get the community participating in a way that instead of being very transactional, they're in the boat with us, because that's the truth. That's the reality, is that we're all in this community together. The decisions that we make, the things that we do, it affects us, right. And that's what a community is. And so we're really trying to give better handles that represent that in our budget process.
When I was researching, the things that I was reading, it looked like scoring of capital projects. But hearing you talk, you're describing programs, so that sounds like it captures your operating budget too. Are you doing the scoring process for both capital and operating?
We are, and they're separate. So I should have mentioned that before. The CIP, the Capital Improvements Plan, is we've been using the scoring rubric on that a little bit longer. Okay. It's a little bit easier, as you can imagine, because we do all kinds of things in operations they're all values based, but it's still much more complex. With the capital, it's a project. It's an identifiable project. It has a specific budget amount. You do it or you don't, and that's how you can plan them out. So we were able to apply this project, and we did use a tool. We added an equity lens as part of the scoring in it. So we have those that propose projects from departments, which is mostly our municipal services and operations department, and Parks and Recreation as well. But any of the departments would propose projects. They score it, and then we have a peer review process to just check and make sure that the scoring was done on the same scale and that it matched the other ones. But we also invite projects, and this is a long tradition in Lawrence, that we invite the community to propose projects, and we would include those and propose them and show them to the public and where they scored out, and those are part of the discussion and decision process.
Okay. Earlier when you were talking about your 6 commitments, you mentioned KPIs. So I want to hear more about the performance measures that you're tracking to verify that these investments that you're making are really impacting equity over time?
Yeah. So this was a lot of the challenge internally when we were setting up this new version of our strategic plan. So what I asked is that you can have an outcome-based strategic plan. So safe and secure is one of them, and that would be that's an area. So how do we get the most results that make it a safe and secure community? But when they're forced to say through the lens of financial, for process, for equity and inclusion, then you say, how in that lens can you measure success on the outcome layer? So they're overlapping. So you can click and say, show me all the key performance indicators for everything from an outcome perspective. And it lists all of them. But then you can also click on, how about the engaged and empowered teams, that perspective. So you can see all of the outcome measures under engaged and empowered teams. So it's very important that and it's more complicated. I mean, I'm even having trouble describing it here, but because they overlap that way, they're embedded. And so they're partners in achieving results. So our director of equity and inclusion is a partner with our unmistakable identity champion, which is Parks and Recreation and Culture Director. So they become partners in trying to achieve results on specific performance measures. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah,
so in an unmistakable identity, for equity and inclusion, the strategy is develop and support initiatives that engage the underserved and underrepresented community. And we use key performance indicators to ask on our survey, our community survey questions. We've oversampled so that we can see how different segments of our population answer that question. Are they feeling like their culture is represented in the activities that we have to do? So you can see we need to be moving that needle. If we both are talking about how do we change that needle or that measure, then they're partners in how that's done. Both are held accountable and both lead teams that help them achieve those results.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like your plan was really informed by your community. You had great support from your elected leadership. Have you met any resistance from elected officials or community voices for this approach?
Yes, of course. I mean, this is change. So change is good or bad depending on your perspective, maybe what you're trying to do. We've got 100,000 different perspectives in our community that we try and account for and that are engaging in it. So, and also, we've been on a about 3.5-year journey of putting this in place and building it and putting it in place. And so people are just now finding it. People are understanding, oh, you really meant what you said. Oh, you're applying your resources, our resources that way. Oh, you're scoring things off of the strategic plan, not off of what you've been doing for the last 27 years. There's a lot of legacy that that's having to be accounted for. This isn't perfect. The plan itself isn't perfect. It was what we tried to say reflect the listening of a point in time. Now we did go back because the first capture was pre-pandemic, and it was also before the murder of George Floyd. So 2 huge events happened, and we said we needed to go back and talk to the community about that because things have changed. People's perspectives have changed. What they need right now from their government or the way we do our work has changed in their perspective. So we did account for those things. But for the most part, it's still kind of a point in time, and then we're confronting, hundreds of years of the work that local government has been doing in Lawrence, Kansas, and how it's been done in infrastructure and different changes in our population and where it lives, how neighborhoods have changed, how our laws and policies have changed. So there's a lot of legacy that this great idea might be confronting, and we're going to take the time it takes to make that move.
Yeah, so when you are encountering that tension between legacy and what you're seeing in the scores for this new plan, how How are you dealing with that tension? What's your approach to that?
Well, it's been hard. I mean, there's been some time. Last budget, what the scoring came out to was these are some things that we think aren't high enough priority to continue. Well, we heard from the community who's used to, we engage when we don't like something. Mm-hmm. When you're changing something that I didn't give you approval to do, right, then that's when they engaged, and they told us that. And that was hard. It became, almost personal, but the commission was good at listening and saying, hey, there's a city manager's proposal. It's done off of this system. We can't account for everything. Maybe it didn't work out this time, but it's not the machine isn't broken. It's more we need to be putting better data into that. We need to learn from this. We need to evaluate different values conflicts in our scoring system. We need to do those things. So, or maybe we forgot something. Mm-hmm. Maybe something's not accounted for in our 85 key performance indicators that say this is where we want results to be. Well, maybe there's another one that should have been added, or it's not a key performance indicator, but still an important performance indicator, and we need to account for that. So we need to be brave enough to say it's not perfect, brave enough to say we're going to make individual decisions that are outside of what the machine spit out. That's public policy. Right. That's community. That's the role of democracy and local government, representative democracy. And I really continue to tell our elected leadership, listen, it's okay for you to pluck a project and stick it on the top of the list. That's your job. That's you listening. That's the incalculable role that elected leadership plays. And hopefully we as public administrators are also getting a sensitivity to, I bet there's going to be reaction here, maybe we should account for that. Mm-hmm. And let's find out why it is that the machine's spitting out something that isn't probably going to match up what the community really wants. And so we do those things. And then there's a lot of this legacy confrontation is like, do we have the courage to let go of something that we can't find an audience for anymore? We keep doing something, but it was inspired by something from 19 years ago, and that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to do, because we're confronting scarcity of resources, and inflation factors are stretching our budget like they are probably everybody else's.
Yeah. So I think I hear you saying you're really treating this scoring process like it's a tool. It's a tool that's helping facilitate a conversation and giving your community common language.
Yes. Around
having that conversation. It's not necessarily the end all be all.
It isn't. I mean, we'd love to have just hit the button and it spits out the right answer and then we move on with it. That's not the nature of humanity. That's not the nature of community, which is what we're in, and I think a lot of local government has been in a transactional relationship mode probably since the 80s. I guess that's what 33 years in the business gets me, is some perspective of seeing what trends come and go. But yes, customer service, I pay your salary. I give you my tax dollars, you give me what I want. And if I don't get it from the machine, I bang on the side, and then I'll see you next time I want something, or I pay attention to it. I don't think that's the same as what I believe local government is capable of doing. I think it's bigger and better than that. It's richer. It's got more layers. And when we conceptualize it as community, I like to say a barn raising versus a vending machine. And I didn't make that up. I stole that. But I really believe in that. And we as a community can come together to do some really big, hard things that might benefit some this time more than others, but next time it might be you. Right. And so make sure you show up. And I think if we can return back to that kind of understanding of how we are coming together as a community, that it is going to produce much more sustainable results. And maybe we're in the process of doing that work. We aren't as polarized. We aren't as polarized, and it will help us maybe be inspired to do better things, and probably inspired to be more thoughtful about how we're deploying these precious resources and achieving some much better results and more equitable results.
Right. That's the dream.
Yeah.
All right. Craig, this has been really helpful. I'm really interested to kind of get on your website and read more about what you all are doing in Lawrence. But I'm going to ask you to shift just a little bit and think about where you started on this journey. Like, what advice do you have for communities that are grappling with how to improve their commitment to equity in city services and maybe aren't quite as far along as where you are yet?
I think we absolutely did the right thing in listening. I mean, going back out there another weekend to table at the library is hard, but when we kept doing it, you almost can't do too much of that. And I was proud that we were patient enough. And it was probably because I was new and I was insistent and like, oh, new guy wants to do a lot of listening. Okay. That we stayed with it so much so that we didn't miss somebody. And I think this process of going where people are at is an important way to do that listening. You're going to have to do the y'all come things with the big room. You need to do those so that they're accessible. But people that are busy lives, you got to do electronic. You got to get out there and let them have the time. If it's 2:00 in the morning that works for them because they're working a shift, then you've got to have avenues so that you can do that listening there, because they have just as much right to understand what they want from their local government. So I'd say the listening piece is the secret sauce. Once you do that, then we're lucky that we've got a lot of great tools out there. I mentioned a couple by name, but there are some really good. I keep calling them tools, but handles that we can put on our work so that it's not so wonkish and jargony, and it is accessible. If we talk about outcomes, we talk about commitments, we talk about language that our community understands, it's extra work to simplify complex things. And I think if we can do that, and we're doing it with some of these electronic tools, we're doing it with some of these organizations that are helping. I think those are good starts. There's work out there. Go steal ideas. Everything in this is based in something else. I mentioned a couple, but there's stuff that is clearly reflected in this that has inspired me over the years, and that other team members, it contributed, and they're not sure where they got it from. And the nice thing is we're through podcasts and through electronics and social media, but also conferences and getting back to face-to-face. Idea sharing is really helpful. And so, yes, steal from us, steal from other people, and adapt it and make it right for your community.
Yeah, very good. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, just this is good and inspiring work, and I do have energy even after being at it a while, and I have energy because I'm working with other people in local government, and especially people coming into the local government now that are seeing the world just differently, which is good and healthy and awesome. So that's what energizes me now, is to see the young leadership coming in and doing things differently and making those adaptations. Yeah.
Perfect. That's what GovLove's all about. We like to tell the stories of people who have the energy and are on the front lines.
Right.
And we got 500 plus episodes that people can listen to if they're looking for inspiration, as you suggested. It's there. So we appreciate your time. All right, Craig. Well, thank you so much for joining the GovLove podcast. Our closer, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
Connected. Stereo MCs.
Okay, Connected. Great theme for community engagement in our conversation today. So that ends our episode for today. Thank you so much to our guest, Craig Owens. Craig, enjoy the rest of your time at SELC and here in Kansas City. To our audience, thank you for listening. If you have questions or ideas for future podcast episodes, you can reach us at elgl.org/GovLove or on Twitter @GovLovePodcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.